He is many things: poet, producer, director, writer, editor, cinematographer, as well as the executive director of the Bowery Poetry Club and co-owner of the Melnechuk Williams Company, which produces films. He's been tutored and mentored by poet. Oh my God, I did it again. I'm just going to roll with it this time. Bowery Poetry founder, poet, and language activist Bob Holman, improv theater wizard David Shepard, and renowned Israeli filmmaker Amos Kolek. Here he is, Nikhil Melnechuk. How are we doing?
I'm doing well. That's quite an intro, and I guess it explains why I drink so much coffee.
I bet it, yeah, it really does.
How are you doing today?
I'm okay, yeah. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. As you mentioned, Bob Holman, who founded Bowery Poetry, he was on the show previously, and he loved it, so I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that he enjoyed it, and I'm so happy you took me up on the offer.
Of course.
So I thought it would be kind of fitting to start the show if you would tell us about your relationship with Bob. It doesn't sound like you're just friends or anything.
I mean, Bob is an inimitable character, and he's played an outsized role in my life, I've got to say. I went to university at Wesleyan in Connecticut, and his daughter, Daisy Holman, one of his two daughters, was actually a student there. And I just sort of saw Bob from afar. I'd heard about Bowery Poetry since it kind of opened in 2002. I'd heard about it. My grandfather is a poet, and he told me about it. And it's part of the reason that I moved to New York was to seek out Bowery and see what was going on there. And when I went the first time, I met Bob there, and something clicked. You know, he and I hit it off. I think I certainly saw a lot in him of what I wanted to become myself. He's an entrepreneur, he's an artist, and he gives a lot to the community, and those are all qualities that I really appreciated. So, he really took me around New York, introduced me to the poetry scene, and when it was the time had come for him to pass on Bowery Arts and Science, which runs Bowery Poetry, he picked me and a dear friend of mine, Adam Horowitz, and from then the relationship just deepened. He's been an artistic mentor, and he guides me in running Bowery Poetry. So he also has great taste in whiskey and has opened my palate up to that. So pretty much I'd have to say that he's just a beloved person in my life.
That's glad to hear. It's good to have people to work with and to light your path with you.
Absolutely.
Bob called your version of the Bowery Poetry Club. He told me in an email. He says it's like Bowery 2.0. How do you... the Bowery Poetry Club is like an icon. How do you go about adapting and changing something like that?
Fair. I mean, I think 2.0 is an apt description because it recalls software. You know, how companies will roll out a new piece of software that is it looks different, that feels different, but is the same thing at heart. And also has a startup feel to it, and that's really what's changed at Bowery Poetry. We used to be a 7-day-a-week booking venue, meaning we were trying to cram in everything we could possibly find, and that's really where we developed this true eclectic reputation that Bob really fostered. Then in 2013, when we reopened and I came on to run it, we reopened as a nonprofit, and we share the space with Duane Park, which is a burlesque club. So now we have less time in the space, and that's really meant that we get to be more selective about what we put on, and it's really led us to put up series. We have an amazing open mic that happens every Sunday called Poet NY, and we have a slam that happens every Monday called Bowery Slam. Bowery Poetry had existed in Bob Holman's image 10 years. He made it world famous. And his famous motto for Bowery Poetry is, everything is subject to change. It's even imprinted above our front door. And I think I keep that in mind when I think about all the changes. It's if you rest on on your laurels, you fall behind. And poetry is always ahead of culture. It's always one step ahead of politics, one step ahead of the change. It's beyond the wave. So, there have been a lot of changes with Bowery, but it feels thrilling to me.
It sounds like it was quite the ride. It sounds like it might still be quite the ride.
Yeah, it's every day something new with that place. Absolutely.
While the show is about the writers, not so much the writing, Bob did suggest that not everyone's heard your work. So could I get you to read something for us?
Absolutely. One of the joys of Bowery is getting to put other people on stage. So I appreciate the chance to read a little something here. I'm going to read a short piece. I'll just start. The oppressed people have a lesson for the world, a lesson of oppression. We need to blow ourselves out of the world. So we risk death. So we die. That victim self holding on to life so tight, already dead in the every moment life, sacrificed to fear, lives without life, loves without love, hopes without hope. One by one, in heart by heart, the beloved dies. The fear is found at the roots of the fear. My body gives up. I've lost everything I thought I was living for and become the stillness thought was living for. The grin lit up in play. The cock sprung out in joy. The blood filling every space the body's kept for itself. All of me unlocked, I sing.
That was nice. And kind of heavy. But I suppose good poetry is, right?
Is what?
Is heavy, is emotional.
Yeah, there's a lot of different types of poetry. That's something I love about Bowery. You never know what you're going to get. There's a lot of variety there.
I bet. I should clarify. A lot of the amazing work that I've heard, I found it to be instantly gripping because of the emotional strings it yanked, in me. Not necessarily that it was depressing or agitated or anything, just that it riled me in some way.
Absolutely.
So on your website, you refer to yourself as a film poet. Would you tell us how you came up with that for a moniker?
Well, I started off, my first artistic passion was filmmaking, and it still is. And over time, I discovered poetry, and I felt that the two arts had a lot in common, but also were vastly different. A film production is something that takes so many people. It takes money, it takes resources, it takes crews and sets and scripts, and it was something that, you had an idea, and 2 years later you had a film. And a poem is the exact opposite. You have an idea, if you have a pen, you've got the poem 5 minutes later. Maybe you edit it for 2 years, but it's something that you can do entirely yourself and entirely without any resources or any money or any other needs. And there's something appealing about both of them. I love working with people, and I love that solo introspection that can lead to a poem. And recently, what's happened with digital video and with cell phones being able to take video and with kids being taught filmmaking in schools is that filmmaking is such an imminently less expensive and potentially simpler process. So what I've been experimenting with the last few years, and some of my film partners and mentors have been experimenting with, is trying to make films immediately. Make films that are based upon improvisation. Make films that try to take that immediacy of a poem and convey it through a visual medium like film. So when I say film poet, I'm talking about trying to use those two forms together to make something that might be wholly new, but draws from both of those forms. Draws on the visual storytelling of film and the fact that it can connect with people across the world with sounds and images, and then draw on the fact that poetry has this immediate quality and this verbal quality, and this long history as an art form where film is so new. So I think when I say a film poet, it's a new thing, and I'm still working to define really what that form is going to be, and that's what I'm working on.
The other two mentors in the cue card, which were David Shepard and Amos, say that again for me, Amos Kolek?
Amos Kolek.
Kolek, sorry. Are they helping you with this? Did they mentor you with this?
Absolutely. I'm sure you've seen Saturday Night Live, right?
On occasion, yeah.
Well, the precursor to Saturday Night Live was improv theater in Chicago called Second City. And David Shepard was one of the founders of Second City. And that whole Chicago scene was built around improvisation and built around the idea that you could, get something very fresh by throwing people up on stage and having the audience suggest prompts, all these things that have become the improv games that we know about. But as a mentor, David was really pushing me into thinking about how much could be gained by using improvisation in filmmaking. Sometimes people think of improvisation as something that can only be used towards comedy, but I was really interested in pushing improvisation to create scenes and sequences that felt really fresh, that felt off the cuff, that kind of drew from French New Wave thinking about film as something that wasn't stale, that wasn't in the studio, but something that was on the streets and live. So David really helped me get my mind around these ideas and start thinking about that sort of creation. And then Amos I met in New York about 7 years ago now, and he was making those films. He was using improvisation. He was using real events and real situations and real characters to create fictional narratives and fictional stories. And I got the opportunity to work with him on an improvised film project, and he's just been advising me since then on how to continue to develop that work.
It sounds like you guys are kind of united to make something that doesn't really have a label prior to this endeavor, let's call it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's somewhere that poetry kind of has a leg up over film. I think every poet is working in his or her own style. There are classifications of, this is sound poetry, or this is contemplative poetry or existential poetry or what have you. But it's so hard to really buy into any of those classifications because each mind is so unique in what they create. And yet in films, we're so caught in these specific genres. That's a comedy. That's a thriller. That's a sci-fi movie. And so I think what's exciting when we combine film and poetry is we sort of break down some of these classifications. And I would love to get to a point where you went into a film with an open mind, not caring whether it was going to be a comedy or a drama or a thriller, but just went into it listening for that those artists' voice to come through and tell you what it meant, what it was about.
That sounds like quite the dream. I hope you achieve that. 3 people changing the face of film. It sounds like a film. That's cool.
In a world.
Right? In a world where 80% of all films are kind of sort of labeled the same. Yeah. So I suppose you hear this a lot as a filmmaker, but why movies? Why did you decide that as your creative avenue for life? Did you decide? Did it kind of choose you? How did that happen? I
think that I was just gripped by how how fucking awesome it was to work together with a big group of people all on the same creative process and creative project, where everybody in that team had a different skill, had a different specialty. You know, you had one person who was amazing at filming, one person, and they were the cinematographer, one person who knew costumes, knew clothing, they were the costume designer, somebody who had written the script or had come up with the story, someone who knew how to lead that whole team, someone who knew how to act. And you put all those skills together to make something that was art, something that, you know, had a voice, had a vision, and that could change the world through the perspective that it presented. So I loved, I mean, just the whole concept, how big, how exciting films were to work on, and how broad their message could be. I mean, you can make a film and it can be seen by hundreds of millions of people. I think that was very exciting to me.
How many? It sounds like you have a really a fire for that. How many films have you made?
I've worked on dozens of films in different capacities. This past year, I directed 2 short films. One was called Jack and Jill, and the other was called Something Happened, and those will be in film festivals this year. Those are just the 2 most recent. I've directed 2 experimental feature films that I made when I was a teenager, and a handful of short films and short documentaries. And then as a producer, I produced a few experimental features, 5 or 6 short films, a feature documentary on American gypsies. Worked on about 15 projects, I would say, in film.
For people who might not know, what is the big difference between a producer and a developer? I'm sorry, developers video
director?
games. Director, sorry.
I would say maybe a broad way to think about a movie project is a company that gets created for the specific purpose of making the film, and then when the film is done, the company closes. And the director of the film is like the artistic director of the company. It's the person who has the oversight about everything creative about the project. You know, has the story in mind, has the actors in mind, and makes all the artistic decisions. And the producer is like the CEO of the company. They have the business of the film in mind. And the business meaning, how do you actually practically get this thing done? How do you find the money? How do you find the people? So there's a lot of creativity in who you choose to bring on. And then how do you get that team to work together smoothly? That's kind of the difference between a director and a producer.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And another just basic question. What exactly is a film festival? I don't actually think I've ever been to one.
They're pretty fun.
I bet.
You know, there's like, yeah, you gotta go check one out. People are making thousands of films every year, but you know, you only see maybe 50 or 60 that hit mainstream theaters around the country. So a film festival, and there are thousands of them all over the world, are places that pull together different sets of films that are being made by people out of the mainstream. So really, you go and it's like you know, it's a celebration of film. You watch the best festivals. You know, will play features and short films and documentaries and experimental films during the days and nights, and then they'll also have parties and dinners and lectures and talkbacks, just opportunities for filmmakers and people who like movies to get together. So they're kind of like conventions for filmmakers.
I was going to say, it sounds like Comic-Con, but for movies.
It's exactly that. Yeah, except with fewer people dressed up.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. If you said you had a couple of films hitting film festivals, which ones are they going to hit so I can like tell everybody and plug it in the show and everything?
Well, the first one that's coming up is Jack and Jill is going to be playing at the Garden State Film Festival, which is New Jersey's premier festival in Atlantic City. And that's going to be the weekend of March 30th to April 2nd. So that's the nearest one coming up. You guys should definitely check out the Garden State Film Festival in Atlantic City. And if you haven't been to Atlantic City, which I hadn't been before I went to this festival 2 years ago, it's a pretty wild place, so check it out.
You said you had a second film hitting as well.
Oh, yeah, for Something Happened. I'm not sure where the first screening of that is going to be at this moment.
Oh, okay. Well, you'll have to get me posted, and I'll put it in the show bio after. I can edit them after they're uploaded, so I'll have to put that in.
That would be great.
Absolutely. Be great. So, if I could get you to read one more thing, because Bob, what did he say? He said that lots of people know Nikhil, lots of people know his administration and his film work. Not so many people know the poetry work. So you'll be the first person I'll have had read more than one piece of work. But I kind of feel like I would love. Go ahead.
I would love to share some more poetry.
Wonderful.
This one is in a completely different realm than the other one. This one is more conversational. It's called Sex Tape, and it's in a number of different parts. We pause mid-sex to flirt and laugh. You say, "It was a minute ago we sat here talking. Now you're inside me." You say, "I wonder if you find me simple. I'm used to being the introspective one. Not so with you." And then you touch me as if you know the way I'll feel that touch. You say, "To know you is to love you." I am simple. I raise your left leg, your right under mine, priming the spine like of a thick new book with a firm palm, of being open to the air, of wind so sure it's still, no weaker place for it to fill. I scream in pleasure, doing for once the thing I'm doing completely and through to the end. You seem surprised at what you have allowed, at how a pleasure starts to rim a fear, then falls in. Splinter in a chair, crack deep within the girder, ticking heart disease. Sometimes I'm afraid you'll bite. We find a small apartment and give our child the room with all the light, the queen bed. Make love quietly on the futon, then listen, our breathing slowing to her cries. I bring her to you, put one hand on her palm-sized back, the other on the place she came out of you, and we fall asleep, all things we have together touching. The moon enters the night like a child's face, parting the curtains. Moon, like a child's face, half-made, the beauty we can see. You grind your teeth. I wonder what you've seen to start the body digesting itself. No one is inside out. I wait for you under the shower while you keep dry outside the curtain. I soap each part twice, washing me, washing you. I've come to think it's better to love. Have you thought this? Maybe you did and it passed, or maybe you haven't yet. Maybe you've always known, but imagine we knew it at once. Mine's a floating heart, yours an eddy. I'm pulled in, love streams away. Thanks.
That was really, really good. Thank you for sharing that with us. That was Sex Tape, yes?
What did you say?
That was the name of it, yeah. Sex Tape. Did your previous piece have a name?
No, it was untitled.
Fair enough. Okay, I just didn't want to miss it.
The first piece that I wrote is a section of... the first piece that I read is a section of a manuscript that I'm currently editing, along with the help of another poet named Anton Yakovlev. So it's part of a book, and it's part of a book-length poem. So each section doesn't have its own title.
That makes a lot of sense. So we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you one more question, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times before, but I want to hear the answer so I can share it with everybody else who hasn't heard you answer it before. What's the first film you ever made?
The first film I ever made. It was a short experimental film called Where Are All the Clowns? And it was a silent film, and I made it when I was in high school with a group of friends, and we put it out to this contest that Second City was running, and it got chosen as the best student short film in the country. So that sort of was a launching point for me to really get into that film, get into the film industry. But also, it was, if I look back, completely a film poem. It had its own poetic logic to it, and the way the story progressed, and it was just a very strange story about somebody who breaks into somebody's house to rob from them. But as he's stealing objects from her room, he starts to be taken by how he's realizing that this person who he's robbing from is an individual. And the things that he's taking have significance to them, so he puts them back and he leaves. But this is all told visually and without any dialogue, so it very much, it was drawing from the poetic.
I'm trying to imagine that in my head. I would love to see that.
Yeah, I would love to see it too. I gotta find it somewhere. It's like probably on an old digital video cassette that there's no cameras for anymore.
I was just about to ask you if you still had it anywhere.
Not that I know of, but you asking makes me wanna take a look. I'll have to go find it.
Please, if you have it, that'd be wonderful. So,
absolutely.
Did you grow up making like home movies? Does your family have that? We have photo albums, but I don't have home movies, but I know people who do. Did you have that?
My parents not so much weren't into making home movies, but my grandfather on my mother's side, he got a camera. He was always interested in new art forms. He was a painter himself, and he let me use it, and I got the opportunity to intern at a young age with our local public access TV station, and they had a youth group where they had college film teachers teaching teenagers how to make movies, and I started going there when I was 8. So I really got a chance to learn the technology. And then once the technology gets out of the way, you can think creatively about it. And that's what's so cool about poetry. The technology is the first technology you learn, and that's writing. You know immediately most people know how to write, and so it's very easy to take your thoughts and start putting them on pen to paper and writing a poem. But for film, people feel like there's this barrier of cameras and barrier of editing. But once you learn how to use a camera, once you learn how to use Final Cut Pro, those things fall away, and you can just start thinking about it as simply as if you were about to write a poem.
Final Cut Pro is a computer program?
Yeah, it's editing software for the Mac. Yeah.
Oh, Mac. To be fair, I play video games on my computer, so I'm a PC guy.
You can use Adobe Premiere, which is what we use at Bowery, and that works for anything.
Thank you. And it's not that I'm anti-Mac or anything. I just play. My primary focus for my computer is video games, and PC I like better for that. But
what's your favorite video game?
Oh God, that changes from month to month. At the moment, Disgaea 1 and Disgaea 2, which Disgaea 2 came out of the PC like 2 days ago. Which I've
never played it. What is it about?
Disgaea 1 and 2, actually the whole series. There's, ranging from the PS2 to the more recent ones on the PS4. I almost said PS5. That'll probably happen though.
You just invented it.
Yeah, right. Patent. It's a strategy. It's like, have you ever heard of Final Fantasy Tactics?
Yes.
It's like that, but way over the top. Every single thing you could possibly enjoy or hate about a strategy RPG dropped and raised to just ridiculous levels. Your max level is 9,999 as opposed to 99. You can reincarnate your characters. Your top stats are in the billions. Yeah. It's just absurd. And and it's got exploding penguins in it.
Man, yeah, we got to have more exploding penguins in poetry. That's something. To all you listeners who are poets, my challenge is write a poem with an exploding penguin and send it to the podcast.
That would be awesome. I will take any poem. I will officially take any poem that has an exploding penguin in it.
We should have an exploding penguin night at Bowery Poetry.
That would be great.
Exploding poems. That's the thing.
Do you play video games?
I have at different times, but I can't say I'm a gamer. But it's definitely like one of the worlds out there that's just so unbelievably creative these days. I feel like people are doing things with video games that are just blurring the boundaries of different arts, and especially with how technology is coming up, it's so much faster progressing in video games than it is in film. Like what people are doing with graphics on video games, comes later to films.
I think there's I don't necessarily think there used to be, but I think there certainly is now an argument to be made that video games can be art. Not necessarily all of them, but I certainly think that there's an argument for that now.
I'm totally with you. I mean, I don't think that all movies are art. I don't think all poems are art. And I think it's about the freedom with which it's being made. If a film is being made solely to sell tickets and make money, I'm not sure I would call it art. And if a poem's being written to be the soundtrack to a commercial or in a print advertisement, I'm not sure if that's art either. And I see that there's a lot of platforms that are letting indie developers make games, and I think that's really cool because you're getting people who are just wildly experimenting and putting out pretty interesting stuff, and that's art.
Good to share your opinion. I think that I agree with you. There are a lot more companies and platforms recently, not just allowing straight up indie development of titles, but more and more companies saying, "Yeah, come mod the crap out of our game. Do whatever you want to do with it."
Yeah.
If you want golden potatoes, knock yourself out. I actually have a game where that is a mod. I don't have that mod, but it does exist.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, modding is kind of like remixing or something, or rewriting a poem.
Yeah, I suppose that analogy is applicable. Yeah. I've oh god, in the Elder Scrolls series, I've probably spent hundreds of hours, days and days at a time, recalibrating the engine to take new mods, because the fourth game has a 2 gig capacity initially, memory capacity. So even if you have 16 or, God, more than that, 32, it can only take 2 at a time. Which means I think the game engine uses 1.5 at all the times just to run it. So if you want to mod it, you can only add a little bit before the game becomes unstable. But the problem is there are so many good ones, so you spend so much time streamlining them and lacing them together and trying to make them fit in the 2 gig window.
So you're actually working in the code of the mod itself?
Oh yeah, sometimes that's your only option if you want all the stuff. If you don't want to choose,
That's really cool. Have you ever designed one of your own mods?
Oh no, I'm not really sure. Recently I was actually playing around with Unity, thinking about it's a video game development software. I suppose it's for more than that, but that's what I was using it for. And I was thinking about making my own game, and then I had a great idea for it, and I loved the idea, and then I made this show instead.
Well, we gotta all make our choices, you know what I mean? And I appreciate you make the show. You get to communicate with people in a different way.
Oh, it has so far. I've recorded with a great deal more people than I've already uploaded with. I think I'm almost 2 months ahead of schedule for releases. I do one release a week. So while the podcast on the internet's kind of small, the finished files in my computer are kind of big, and it's been a wonderful ride so far. When I set out to do this project, my personal goal was to interview my two writing idols who are still alive, because interviewing corpses is not only creepy but boring.
And who are they?
Big Papa E and Taylor Molly changed my life in a very fundamental way forever.
Wow.
And
Yeah, Taylor Molly. He's got a series once a month at Bowery called Page Meets Stage.
I did know that. Someday I will have to go out there and see it.
You gotta come in. You have open invitation. Let me know when you're gonna come. Come, we'll have a drink, enjoy the show, and you'll meet Taylor.
That would be wonderful. I've met him twice before, I think.
Yeah, have you interviewed him yet?
No. We got a hold of each other on email, and he said, ask me again in May, because he's a busy guy. I imagine he's a super busy man.
I'll put in a good word, and I'm sure Bob will too.
Thank you so much. I've already interviewed Big Papa E. That was wonderful.
That's awesome.
And it's weird. I'm going to interview Taylor. Hopefully, He hasn't actually said yes. He just said ask me again later.
Yeah.
And initially, that was my whole goal. That was it. And I hadn't really considered what would happen in the show after that.
Yeah, you can die happy once you do that.
But it's been so much fun. I don't really think I'm going to stop. I think I'll continue the show as long as people like you and other poets will be on it.
It sounds like you got momentum, so you should definitely keep doing it.
Thank you so much. So we really are pushing, 40, 45 minutes. So I'm going to thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Anytime. Thanks.